Okay, this is the second video. I'm going to define what the significance level alpha is. Alpha is the maximum allowable probability of rejecting HO when it is true. So alpha is the maximum allowable probability of making a mistake of rejecting the null hypothesis when it is actually true. Type 1 error. Type 1 error happens when you reject HO when it is true. For example, somebody tells you 1 plus 1 equals 2 and you tell them no, you're wrong. That is a type 1 error. Now type 2 error, when you fail to reject HO when it is false. Like someone will tell you 1 plus 2 is 5 and then you would agree with it. This is a type 2 error. Those kind of mistakes do happen in statistics. Now the p-value, this is the most important thing because this value is going to help us decide whether we can reject the null hypothesis or fail to reject the null hypothesis. This is what the p-value is about, and I did provide some videos explaining the p-value. If the null hypothesis were true, what is the probability of observing the current data? You will be giving, just some data from a sample. So what is the probability that what you got from the sample is likely to happen? And that's where we find the p-value. We'll be using technology to find the p-value. Now the truth of HO. Let me walk you through this table here. If HO was true and you rejected it, that means you made a type 1 error. Now if HO was true and you failed to reject it, well, you did a good decision because it is true and you did not reject it. Now if HO was false and you rejected it, you made a correct decision because we're supposed to reject false things. But if HO is false and we failed to reject it, we made a type 2 error. There are 3 different types of hypotheses. The first one is called the left tail test. And when you write the null and the alternative like that, so that means your alternative has to have a less than sign. The right tail test is when your null hypothesis has the equal sign, but your alternative has a greater than sign. This is called the right tail test. A two-tailed test, it's when your null is always an equal sign, your alternative is not equal to 2. So you need to distinguish between the 3. But notice, the null hypothesis will always have the equal sign and the alternative will have less than, greater than, or not equal to. And also remember, guys, whether the problem has a statement less than or equal to, which is at most, or has this statement at least, or has equal, all of them have to be replaced when you write your null hypothesis with one sign, which is the equal sign. This is how your book does things. Now, in order to perform a hypothesis test, there are 5 steps. I'm just going to summarize them and then go to a problem right away. You have to state the null and the alternative hypothesis. The null is a statement of equality, and the alternative hypothesis is a statement where you use less than, greater than, or not equal to. And then you have to state where the claim is. In the court case, there are 2 hypotheses. Defendant is not guilty. This is the null hypothesis. And defendant is guilty. This is the alternative hypothesis. Step 2, you have to calculate what we call a standardized test statistic. You will be given information about the sample, like, the sample mean, the standard deviation, the sample size, etc. You have to summarize this in what we call a z-score, which is you learned, just in a previous chapter. So you'll be finding this. Step 3, you will be either finding what we call a critical value that can help us to make a decision to reject the null hypothesis, fail to reject the null hypothesis, or a p-value. I'm going to emphasize on the p-value because you can use that using technology, so it will be many problems using the p-value. After step 3, guys, you made a decision whether to reject the null hypothesis or fail to reject the null hypothesis based on the p-value. And then the last step, write your conclusion in words in terms of the claim. For example, can you say that I have enough evidence to support the claim, or there is not enough evidence to support the claim, etc. You will learn how to write this language. So these are the steps required in order to perform a hypothesis test. And in the next video, I'm gonna start performing those hypothesis tests.